Data migrations are complex and irritating, creating days of frustration from setup to cutover. MoveBot was built from the ground up to fix that. MoveBot is the simplest, fastest tool for moving files and emails that there is. Fully hosted with no infrastructure, no virtual machines, none of that craziness. Sign up, connect, scan, and you'll be moving data in minutes. Move data like a pro at atmsp.link/MoveBot.
So I was on the subway for the first time in like 5 years yesterday in New York City. I was in the city taking a class. We'll talk about that later. But I had to go uptown to go to a client, and I have not been in the since COVID. I've been in the city maybe like 8 times in total, right? And I took the train in for the first time like these last 3 days, and I had to go to a client up in Harlem, and I was like, "Oh crap, I have to take the subway." They've really improved the New York City subway. I mean, it's still disgusting and dirty, but like the signage was a lot better. I used my watch to like pay for the MTA piece. I didn't have to get like a swipe card. The subway cars themselves, which threw me for a bit because the subway car was a 4000 series, not a 9000 series, but it had like LED signage and even ads in it that were LED and like nice maps and all this other stuff. And then I got on, and then I held on to the subway pole because I had to, and then I realized that's how you get COVID.
Yeah.
Like I immediately, when I was coming back from the client, like I got to the client, I immediately washed my hands. And then when I was coming back from the client, I had to take the subway back to Penn Station, which, if anyone knows, you don't go to the bathroom in Penn Station. So I basically held on with one hand the whole ride down, and then I kind of just did this and walked around with my hand out the entire time for the rest of the day until I got on my train home, sat on the train with my hand up like this, got home, and then immediately washed this hand.
I'm pretty sure that it's something like that, probably because I flew through Atlanta for ChannelCon, so I'm pretty sure that's where I got COVID. It wasn't actually at ChannelCon; it was in the subway in Atlanta, for the airport.
That's what it always is. So I was a little nervous, but kudos to you, MTA, for like getting your ish a little bit together during the one time that no one was riding you.
Level up your domain security and email deliverability. Achieve peace of mind. Reduce ransomware, reduce business email compromise, reduce email phishing and other attacks. Make DMARC a new revenue stream for your MSP. Becoming a managed service provider partner with EasyDMARC is an excellent opportunity for your business to boost sales and increase revenue. Your customers need DMARC, although they might not realize it yet. Your job is to let them know that their email infrastructure might be at risk of email spoofing and phishing attacks, and that you can offer them a simple solution: email authentication. Become the DMARC expert your clients need with EasyDMARC. Find out more today at atmsp.link/EasyDMARC.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the All Things MSP Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Esgar. With me always is my good friend, podcast producer extraordinaire, and today we're only doing blue because of reasons, Eric Anthony. What's up, buddy?
I could start singing the "I'm So Blue" song from VeggieTales, but I won't.
Don't do that. That's a different podcast altogether.
Literally, it's just because that's what color they were when I turned them on, and I didn't have time to change them.
You can't really see mine. I have two down there, and I have another one over there, which I can tell Lady in the Box, like, set my hues to blue, so that does it. Because whenever there's a power outage, they always reset to white. Because Philips is Philips. I don't know what to tell you. What's going on? Everything good? It's been a while. For those who are paying attention, you may or may not have realized that the last couple of episodes seemed like Eric and I were in a mood, and that they may or may not have been consecutive. And the truth of the matter is, and I'll pull back the curtain, Eric and I haven't seen each other in 2 weeks. We had to get some stuff done. I went on vacation, and then I had training, and Eric had to go to do some con or whatever it is. And I don't mean like con like a bad way. I mean like another channel con.
Well, we don't talk about that side of my life.
No, yet again, that's the third podcast. And so we haven't really seen each other. So me legit asking you, like, how are you is a legit ask of how are you?
Yeah. So just busy. Like it seems like things have ramped up. Kids have gone back to school. Not my kids, of course, but well, one of them. I keep forgetting.
You can't keep
We
track
still
of
do
your own
have
kids.
one in university. So he doesn't live here, so I don't, keep track as much. All I do, although the clue should have been, I did have to fill out his financial aid form, so that happened. But yeah, no, it's busy, but good kind of busy. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, over here in New York, New Jersey, the kids don't go back to school until after Labor Day. So hint of when we're recording this. So next week will be so much better for me. You remember how towards the beginning of the summer, after we come off of ACEs, I had discussed that we were going to do these audits, and I was going to run through these audits, and then we got through about a month and a half of them, and then I learned about this compliance module, which we'll talk about later. But then I was like, we're going to do more auditing because of this, and I wanted to get into today's topic, which is the stuff that I had learned at this event that I was at the last couple of days, and it was about security, and it was about identity, and it was about compliance, and one of the things that I miss about going to events, like I don't really go to a lot of events. I really don't. I'm not that I'm sheltered in any way, shape, or form. I just don't go. And I really should, because what happens is every time I go to any event, with the exception of ACEs, because at that point I'm running around like a chicken with its head cut off, right? But like anyone else's events, I come back with pages of notes. And it's not even necessarily notes that are relevant to the topic that is going on. It's that I'm able to get out of my space. I'm able to get out of my head. I'm able to get away from the kids and the dogs and the whatever and the Slack and ding, bang, boom and the ding and the dong and the ladies and the boxes and the whatever, and get a free meal and like think about things holistically. So now I've come back from a 2.5 day event, and it was a very small event. There was not a lot of people. There was only 10 people there. And I have 8 pages of notes from the event and like 6 pages of things that we have to do for customers and we have to do for ourselves. And I've been trying to figure out, and we'll get into the topic of what they are in 1 second, I promise you. But I've categorized it into like 3 buckets, I guess. Like things we have to do ourselves, things we have to do for customers, and things we have to do for ourselves, but marketing only. So we learned a lot about security and compliance and identity, but I need to figure out how to like explain that to customers. We can do that. I want to be able to, I have to build a whole new page on our website, and I have to write some marketing on it. I got to get graphics and do all this other stuff. So I'm putting that in that third bucket. That's why the third bucket is separate from the what we have to do internally, which is like everyone needs to turn on File Vault, or everyone needs to turn on Firewall, or whatever. I love coming back. And what's funny is like I go through, like I go back all the way to South by Southwest Venture to Venture, which was, 2012, 2013. I'd have to look it up, like the first or second one. And I still have notes in my notes app from then that I like refer back to on things. It's such a great way to get out of the space. And I think so many people go to events and they just go, I need to learn everything I can about the thing that's going on. I'm like, you need to listen with half an ear.
So, I mean, that is one of the reasons why I always promote that MSPs should go to events. Now, the flip side of that, especially the last couple of years, is there's a lot of events out there. I mean, I talked to some of the MSPs who are going to events more than one a month. Okay, that's a lot. But this is where you just need to be very selective about the events that you go to. There's plenty of forums out there where you can ask about this event or the other event. And there's a lot of good events out there. And I don't know that there's necessarily, in my opinion, that many bad events out there. And of course, we're not going to name names because we don't do that on the show. But most of them are good events. But not all of them are for you. So make sure you're picking the right events to go to, because like Justin said, I mean, if you go to the right sessions at the right shows, you are going to take a lot of notes. And Justin, you mentioned something else that I think is really important there. and it gets you out of your day-to-day mindset. Physically picking up and moving locations to a different place is going to open up your mind in different ways than just watching a virtual event in your office. And it's
Yeah,
powerful.
100%. 100%. 100%. The reason I wanted to bring this up, though, was because I said that we had done the audits and then we're doing the SOC 2 audits. The next thing is now I'm taking next week. Now, I've been away for a week. I was at training this week. Next week, I've blocked off the entire week, and I marked everything as busy because I'm going to go through my notes and I'm literally going to implement like so much of the stuff that we've done or that I've learned and go through and just kind of like really, because like I came home from one of the days of the conference and I was talking to my wife about it, and I was like, oh, there's just so much I wish I can do, but like I just don't have the time. Like there's so many, and I'm like, between the kids and the dogs, and she's like, what are you talking about? The kids have only been home for 2 weeks. Like our son has been in sleepaway camp for 7 weeks, and our daughter, you drop her off in the morning, you pick her up at night. Like you have all day. I'm like, yeah, but I feel like there's things that are always getting in the way. So what I've done was for next week, blocked off with the exception of the calendar events that were already on there and the meetings that I couldn't move, because I'm not going to do that. Every other minute is blocked off as busy weeks. And I'm telling my team, I'm like, you don't get to bother me. I'm not taking tickets. I'm not going to be bothered on Slack. I may actually quit Slack for a week, which would be really weird for me. And I'm going to go through and pick a thing, and I'm just going to do it. Because I'm the only one who knows whether it's good or bad for the company. Right. And I know some people might be like cringing, oh my God, you're changing models and doing all these things. I'm not going to do something that's going to like, I'm not moving us from Google to Microsoft, for email. Like I'm not, it's not like that kind of thing. These are like things like setting policies and writing documents. Like we want to federate. Apple has this thing in Apple Business Manager where you can federate Apple Business Manager to a company's email provider. So Google, not email, but like identity provider. Mm-hmm. So you can do Google Workspace, you can do Entra, you can do Okta through third party. And if you're doing Apple School Manager, you can tie it to an SIS. We know we want to have all of our clients do this before the end of the year. We also know it's a massive hiccup, and we also know we don't have any documentation written to support any of it. So I'm going to reverse it and say, I'm going to compose the email, not send it. I'm going to write all the documentation we need and publish it internally so we can check it. Then when we're ready, let's send it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I'm doing that stuff. So all of these ideas came from this 2.5 day. I do want to talk about today about the first 2 days of it, which was security and identity, because I think there's a lot out there, especially in the identity part, that would help all of the listeners. Because one of the big things that always comes up for us is the Mac versus PC argument. Right. How do we manage the Macs better? How do we do this? How do we do that? Whatever. And I think there's a really elegant solution that we'll talk about that Apple has introduced called Platform SSO. So let's go backwards. Let's do identity.
Yeah, first, let's give a little more background about what identity management is first.
So when it comes to identity management, we're talking about is we're having a source of truth of your users. We're also talking about a source of truth of your devices. So there's two different aspects of this. Many of you who are listening are probably thinking identity management is just Active Directory. Cool. Active Directory is not a thing anymore. I hate to break it to you. It is, but it's not, right? Because you shouldn't do Active Directory on-prem. It should be in the cloud. And it was Azure, and now it's Entra, which is just Azure backwards. Wait for it. See? Every time. Using Entra, back in the day, back in Mac OS 10.6, we used to have this thing called the Golden Triangle. Okay. And what it was you had Active Directory on-prem and you had Macs in a lab, and you wanted to have the Macs use Active Directory as logins. But the problem was Active Directory didn't have all of the fields needed for a Mac to work. So you had to add At the time, Apple had the Xserve running Mac OS 10 server. And you had that, and that was running Open Directory. So Active Directory, Open Directory, and the client machine created this beautiful little triangle called the Golden Triangle. Apple got rid of server. Apple got rid of the Xserves. Everybody cried. And there has been no good way to have Macs in a corporate environment that can do identity against an Active Directory server. You could bind a Mac to an Active Directory, but that inevitably always fails. 2 examples for that. One, my wife works for Fortune 500, and she's bound to the Active Directory. And when COVID happened, she had to update her password because the Active Directory said 90-day password. Well, the only way she could do that was if she was on-prem on the network. So she had to go to the office to plug in to do it because Active Directory isn't meant for remote, right? The other case of that is we had a client a long time ago who the IT company they were a bigger company. They had IT in another country that was setting the rules. We were just doing the Macs in New York. But the IT company in England said, if you want to connect to the Wi-Fi, you have to put in your Active Directory credentials. Well, overnight, your Active Directory credentials hit that 90-day mark and you couldn't change your password because you couldn't get on the Wi-Fi to get to the Active Directory server.
Yeah.
Right? So these stupid problems would keep coming up.
Well, you always set up a guest network in addition to the corporate network.
Right, but the problem with that is that on a Mac, as soon as you connect to the guest network, which worked, will become the preferred network. So when you come in the next day, it'll just default to the guest network. Right?
Which is a problem in of itself. Yes. I get it.
So there's some hiccup. Whatever. It doesn't matter. They're not my client anymore, and I don't think they're in business. So who cares? So the cool thing that they have now, Apple has introduced, and everyone who's a PC MSP who has a couple of Macs in your environment should be going and reading up on this. It's called Platform SSO. Platform SSO, what it does, it's a built-in technology. You use your mobile device management tool like Intune or Jamf or Adigy, and you can push a configuration. You take the Mac. Now, this is where it's annoying. You have to be an admin. You have to have at least one local admin to sign into the Entra system, but then from there, it's pretty much automated. You can't do a Mac out of the box to do this. But you sign in with, it doesn't have to be an admin. Like the first user admin has to have an account on the computer to do this. They sign in with credentials, and then that device is what they call Kerberized. It creates a Kerberos ticket, and that device is now signed in. And any user can sit down at that computer, click the other user option, type in their username and password from their Entra, and sign in and have an account. Right away, no problems. And even cooler than that is, depending on how your MDM is set up, that user can then go to office.com and click the sign in button and not be prompted for a username and password or 2-factor or anything. It just signs in because it's a Kerberized sign in. So as long as your time servers are in place and your DNS is in place, all of this will work. Number one reason anything with Kerberos breaks, your time servers are off by 5 minutes. See, what I'm really loving about talking about this is that all the listeners are going, holy shit, Justin actually does know technical stuff. He's not just a flapping head of bullshit. Yeah, I've passed tests on this. But it was really cool because in this class, they had an Entra set up for us. They had usernames and passwords. So I don't know what kind of account you would need with Office or whatever it is. But we signed in with, the Office-based email. And these were even on Microsoft. These weren't even legit domain. It was like, user at testcenter.onmicrosoft.com had the password, and it signed in, and it worked. It just worked. And it was so just like, mwah, gorgeous.
Well, and that's fundamentally why we're driving identity management, right? Is for security, number one, but also so that can security, even though, I kind of, in my mind, kind of breaks the zero trust model a little bit, right? Because now you're propagating trust across multiple areas. But done correctly, I think it is definitely makes it more secure and more convenient at the same time versus not having it.
Yeah. It was funny because I was having a conversation with a client the other day about whether or not single sign-on is a good technology or not, because they're like, well, we tell people not to have the same password for everything. And I had to basically explain to them that like single sign-on isn't the same password for everything. It's one password for one thing, and that thing uses APIs to talk to all of those other things. So like, it's not like my Okta password is the same as my Office password. No, if I go to Office, I get thrown back to Okta to do stuff. And so having that conversation and kind of like, you can see like the motor moving at that point, being like, oh, that makes a lot more sense to get that working. And so taking it a step further, using platform SSO allows us to do SSO to the computer. Now, this is not out yet, but apparently it's going to be in, because it works in the beta, so I can talk about this. This is public beta. File Vault will work with platform SSO in an upcoming OS, which will probably be out in the fall. So if you're listening to this when this comes out, you got to wait. If you're listening to this in 2026, like you're listening to everything else we've talked about in the past, this already exists. So there's some cool stuff around that. Now, in the class, we looked at Okta as well as an identity provider. And I have a lot of clients that are on Okta, right? I like Okta. Mm-hmm. I think it's great. And with our MDM Adigy, we can use something called Adigy Identity to allow users to sign in with Okta, because there is no native, or I think they may have just released a new native Mac login tool. On the PC side, there's a product, oddly enough, called Techniques. Not the same Techniques as like the audio brand, but another Techniques, that you can install an agent and it does the same thing as Adigy Identity. Okta doesn't have platform SSO. It's not coming. But there were some cool things about Okta where, you know, you have your Okta sign in and you have your push notifications. You can say, yes, it's me. But what I didn't know and I learned about was you can install the Okta Verify app on the computer. And by doing that, what you're doing is once the user has approved the Okta Verify and gone through and actually had to two-factor against their phone, the computer itself is then verified to Okta. So if the user does anything in Okta, they don't get prompted for two-factor. Why? Because the computer has been attested to be proven that it is okay with Okta. And if the computer is logged out, that attestation goes away. The user still has to two-factor to get in to let that attestation happen again. So there was really cool ways to think about this, because one of the things that kept coming up was we think of identity of who we are, what we have, and what we know. I did that backwards, sorry. But like who we are is our username, what we know is our password, and what we have is our multi-factor authentication tool, right? But what if we didn't have to do that? What if it wasn't because a human being, someone can murder me and steal my phone and get into my 1Password or get into my Okta Verify or whatever. And if they knew my password, then they're now me, right?
Right.
But if the device itself had to attest, and they didn't murder me, they just stole the computer in this regard. The device has no way to attest itself against the system. And so you can do certificate-based attestation. I think it's called ACME, Automated Certificate Machine Enrollment. I look forward to your tweets and emails. Where you can do this. And now the device gets to prove who you are. So going back to zero trust networking, it's a little bit of that. Because if the device is saying who it is, and it doesn't matter who the user is or what the user has its user limits, but the device is allowing for things to happen as opposed to it happening from the user perspective, which I thought was a really interesting change in dynamic of how to think about things.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess I'm okay with it if I still have to two-factor to get into the device before the device then can be used to automatically get into those things.
100%, right? Because like it's not. The idea is that these things build on one another, and it allows you to do this stuff. Now, the other thing that I learned about, and I kind of knew about this. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not that dumb. But it was what's the word I'm thinking of here? Like reintroduced to me about just PC MSPs are going to hate me for this one. If you don't already, I'm sorry. It was reintroduced just how secure a Mac laptop, and I'm talking about Apple Silicon specific and kind of T2 Intel, just how secure a Mac laptop is out of the box. Because there are things that we can talk about, like compliance, which we'll get into in our next episode. This is, by the way, everyone, I don't know if we said this earlier. This is a two-parter, so buckle up. There are things that Apple does to secure parts of the computer to prove that the computer is the computer. So going back to the device attestation part, right? There are things in the secure enclave that if you try to inject into, not only would they not work, but if they did work, would fail down the line to prove that that computer is not that computer. So great example, right? Remember the Hackintosh?
Yep.
We were all building those back in the day. I had a Dell Mini 9 that I had forced Mac OS something on.
Yep. I remember an Acer Mini.
Hundreds of dollars. Yeah, I had to buy those like very special hard drives to make it work or whatever it is. Yeah, I put a Mac OS on it. But however, that Mac OS doesn't have secure enclave. Therefore, it doesn't have the specific device controls and certificate building tools to be able to prove to a system that it is what it says it is. So there's some really cool stuff that Apple has been working on. And all of this, by the way, all of this is legitimately available for anyone to download or look at. I'm going to take a hot second to look up the URL.
And we will, of course, include it in the show notes.
No. Here it is. Apple Platform Security. So the long, I think it's just apple.com/security, but the long one is support.apple.com/guide/security/welcome/web. And in there, they talk about, right off the cover, hardware security, system security, encryption and data protection, app security, and services security. And it was just really interesting about figuring like how to build off of these things. So that was a lot of that stuff. And then one of the big ones that I learned about that was really cool. Well, sorry, there's two that I learned about that was really cool. Again, for Windows folks, putting MS Defender for endpoint on a Mac. I never even thought about this.
Yeah.
We put MS Defender endpoint on a Mac and ran it as our malware tool, and it was fast. We actually, there's a guy from, there's a conference called Objective by the Sea, because it takes place in Hawaii. And he has written a lot of programs. And if you go to his GitHub, he has fake malwares that you can download to test with. And we put endpoint protection on the Mac. We pushed it out through MDM, and it caught things so fast, quarantined them, and gave great reporting and things like that. And I never even thought about it because I always just use Malwarebytes.
Right.
I was like, because Malwarebytes has always been for Mac, right? Well, I never even thought about MS Defender for the Mac, MS Defender for endpoint for the Mac. So again, if you're a Windows shop and you have a couple of Macs that are in your office, especially a CEO or C-suite or like the design department, like these are things that you probably already have and you can push out probably through Intune. This way you don't have to get into a Mac MDM like Jamf or Adage,
right?
But you can push out endpoint protection for the Mac. You can do platform SSO. And it makes your life as a admin so much easier.
Yeah, and there are companies. I just talked to one. I think it was just yesterday, actually, that are building interfaces and tools that work on top of Intune to make it easier to use and more efficient. The name of that one happens to be Devicey, but I think there are some other ones as well. And so they're actually taking, because Intune, can be a little bit weird to use in terms of the interface. And a lot of people tried to use it in the beginning and it was not as helpful as they maybe thought it was going to be, or it was harder to adopt. And so now there are these tools that you can lay on top that actually look like they're doing a pretty good job.
The people who are running the program did say that Microsoft is leading the way with platform SSO. So I thought that was kind of interesting to like even hear that, like, oh, Microsoft leading the way with something. The other big one that we learned about was, and this is if you're a Mac consultant and you're looking to do things, a program called Santa. I thought this program was really cool. The reason it's called Santa is because it tells whether or not apps are naughty or nice. It says it on their webpage. And what you can do with Santa is you can block apps based on their name, their bundle ID, the team UID, which is a developer part of it, and just tell the user no. End of story. So like you can block. I know a lot of clients who don't want Spotify being running on their network. You use Santa, you have a centralized repository, and you say, don't allow Spotify. And if they try to launch it, just doesn't work. And all of these conversations that we were having about security got me thinking about like, okay, and going back to that, we're doing our own SOC 2 audit. Do we have file vault? Do we have encryption on all of the computers that we're using? Does everyone in my organization use a work-based computer? Because like when you start as an MSP, a lot of us just use our personal devices as work devices, or we hire our first person and we ask them if they have a computer or things like that. It's not uncommon. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's not uncommon for that to be the case, right? Do we have the right protections in place? So do we have our own malware? Do we have a password manager? Do we have like legit the SOC 2 is asking, is the device encrypted? Does the device have an owner? Does the device have client data on it? Does the device have antivirus and malware, which for whatever reason is not picking up malware bytes? Does the device have a password manager on it? And does the device have sleep settings turned on? Because that's another big one for both security and compliance is like, does the computer go to sleep and does it require a password? Right. And like, it's such a simple, innocuous thing. And I'm like, oh man, it really takes you back and hits you with the fact that like, these are things you have to do internally as well as pitch on your clients. Because again, one thing that MSPs never do is we never eat our own dog food.
I wouldn't say never, but it's very frequent to find people who don't.
Yeah. That's the thing. So that was like my thing about security and identity. There was a lot there that was really cool to see come out from the people who are putting this out there. And there's obviously a lot coming, and there's a lot on this security platform thing that this is based on.
Right.
To really figure out positioning, to figure out the device attestation, to figure out the telemetry of the device, to figure out whether or not the device is secure or not secure based on these different things. And if you're in a mixed environment, like stop hating on the Macs or stop hating on the PCs and find the right tools, because you have to look at it from like a very holistic top-down level. Yeah, it might be annoying that you have to deploy 2 security tools, or you have to deploy 2 MDMs, or you have to deploy 2 encryption tools. What is it on the PC? You use like BitLocker, right? BitLocker on the PC and File Vault on the Mac. Like, all right, I'm terribly sorry that you have to like escrow 2 types of keys, but like do right by your client. Or and especially, here's another thing. Let's flip this to a sales thing, because we're talking about that as that third bucket. One of the things I'm working on next week is composing the email that I'm going to send to my client saying, listen, it's now 2024. The world is very different than it was 10 years ago, let alone 3 years ago. And next year, there's going to be even more regulatory and more security and more compliance and more crap that which I know you don't want to deal with, you have to deal with. So here are the things we're going to do. And some of these will be free, and some of these you're going to pay for because it's time.
Right.
Or you can do it. I don't care. But like, you have to do it. And if you don't do it, ta-ta for now, right? And that includes enabling encryption or Mac firewall. Like I learned something interesting that I didn't know about. The built-in Mac firewall, you can turn it on immediately and it will work. It will not stop any Apple signed services. Like that was the reason I never turned it on for a lot of clients. I was like, I know a lot of them use iCloud, whatever. Mm-hmm. You can just turn it on. Cool. We're just going to turn it on. It doesn't cost anything. We're going to turn it on. We'll push out with a profile and turn it on. Done. Right. But the ones that we've talked about, like SPF, DKIM, and DMARC for security for email, or writing up security documentation. These are things that you as an MSP can charge for. And a lot of the times, a good amount of it is copy and paste.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot to what you said in terms of there's just more and more compliance coming. Security is becoming more and more of a thing, and addressing security on a device by device or application by application or even cloud application to cloud application is becoming more and more difficult to do it one-on-one. And so that's where identity management matters, because if you can create an identity that has those 3 factors that you talked about, and then you can use that to operate in the world that you need to operate in, whether it's the device you're logging into, the application you're using on that device, or the cloud application that you're logging into, that is going to be, in the long run, easier for the client and also more secure.
100%. Be secure. Lock it up. Like from Wedding Crashers. You lock it up. But yeah, I mean, I like I said, you go to an event like this, and that was just, the security and identity were just 2 of the 2.5 days. And I was just like, oh. I have to do all of it. Like it's good. It's bad, but it's good. But it's, you know what I'm saying? Well, like it's like eating hot wings. Like they're not good for you. They're delicious. You know, it's like that.
Except the opposite, right? Because it's harder up front to put these things into place, but they will make your life and the life of your clients easier in the long run.
Yeah, but if it's a hot wing thing, I was going to say it's a lot, like the long run of the hot wing is also not that great, if you know what I'm saying. Yeah. Well, now that we've gotten to poop jokes, I think it's time to end the show.
Yes.
I promise we'll do better next time. Tell us what you're doing about security and what your plans are for the rest of the year. Hit us up, facebook.com/group/allthingsmsp. Follow us at youtube.com/@allthingsmsp. Like and subscribe. We need those numbers. We want you to be one of those numbers. Tell us what number you are. Send us a DM at our Facebook group. Let us know what YouTube subscriber you are. Then we will know you're a true fan. True fans. Patreon.com/allthingsmsp.
Something like
Question
that.
Mark? Something like that. We'll find it. Also follow us on all of your favorite podcasting tools. That's Eric. I am Lockdown Justin. Bye.
Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. You can also follow us on Facebook, but better yet, go ahead and join the Facebook group. You can also follow us on Instagram if that's your thing. And make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel at All Things MSP to catch us in all of our video glory. And last but certainly not least, if LinkedIn is your thing, you can follow us there as well. And a special thank you to our premier sponsors, SuperOps, MoveBot, Gozinta, Easy DMARC, and Comtech. And we also want to thank our vendor sponsors. The All Things MSP Podcast is a BizPow LLC production.